Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Please like and share, like and share, like and share. Um, you can go to my Facebook page, the Santita Jackson Show, excuse me, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. But Facebook, because of the traction that we've been getting, has been asking me to ask you to go over to YouTube, to the Santita Jackson Show. So please go there, like and subscribe and share the show. Share the show. And please go to X. I am the at Santita J, at Santita J, streaming over there. And go to the Santita Jackson at Santita J show. But go to at Santita J. That's much easier. And just as we talk about closing the gap, this enthusiasm gap for Kamala Harris, because many people are saying that it's black men. No, it's not that simple. It's a little bit bigger than that. You see a lot of excitement from the Divine Nine and from those of us who went to college. But the fact is, everybody didn't go to college. And when you go to college, even fewer of us are in the Divine Nine. So, and I'm hearing expressions of doubt and even outright hostility from different factions, and we need to talk about that. But we're looking at a big race. APAC, of course, put $100 million into a fund, at least, and that is what they stated. They've already spent a quarter of that on two races alone, so only heaven knows how much money they put into this to take out progressives. Um, Many people have said that they're black progressives, but they were trying to take out Thomas Massey, who's a white libertarian in Kentucky. They went after Congressman Levin up in Michigan, who's from a storied Jewish family. He's president of his synagogue, for heaven's sake. But because these people have taken some humane, progressive positions, they've been taken out, or certainly massive amounts of money have been poured into races to do so. So before we talk about what's happening with Kamala Harris and her record as a prosecutor, that a lot of people are they're not happy about, but in 2019, 2020, that undid her campaign. But it's 4 years later. Things have changed. That's the way politics is. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do, let me start with this. I started with this in the last hour. I was reached out. I got some outreach from the station, and I want to thank Chad Larson and Brett Johnson and everyone at AM 950 Radio. You have been stalwart partners with me in allowing my show to be on this platform, and I thank you for this. But they've gotten some emails from people who are dissatisfied with the show. They feel that I'm not supportive enough of the Democratic ticket, and that what I'm doing is very dangerous, and that what I'm also doing, and just consequently, I'm helping to elect Trump, and nothing could be further from the truth. I'm from a family that is responsible, really, along with Marion Barry and Mayor Richard Hatcher and C. Dolores Tucker and Maxine Waters and Willie Brown. All these people came together, and Bernie Sanders. There were two white elected officials in the United States who endorsed Reverend. Bernie Sanders was one of those persons in 1983. Just a whole lot of people, the Asian community, just so many people came together to make America more fair. And we had a winner take all system when Reverend started to run. If you got 49.9% of the vote, you couldn't get one delegate. Reverend was the first top tier candidate to advocate, to pledge to put a woman on the ticket. The eventual nominee refused to do that. They put Geraldine Ferraro on the ticket to blunt a call to put Reverend on the ticket, because people were shocked, that he had survived the campaign and that he had registered more people at that time than anyone in history. Okay? You would not have had women on the tickets. You would not have had Barack Obama. We got proportional representation. We did there's everything that's been changed. So I criticize the party that we helped to make. And I'm going to continue to do that, because I know, as I talk to people, that if I don't give voice to their concerns, then I don't have credibility. I'm not for censorship. I believe that everyone deserves to be heard, and we don't need to pivot off of talking points. People are in a lot of pain out here, and I want you to feel and know that you have space here. We have the right to question the process by which we came up with a Democratic nominee. We have a right to question whether Joe Biden should be on the ticket or not. That was a question that came up more than 2 years ago. And look, he's not there now. Mark Fancher, you kept saying, I don't see him on the ticket. You kept saying it. We saw this coming. So, really, everybody, if you have criticism of me, I welcome them. Please reach out to me and I will reach back out to you because your criticisms will make me stronger. Steel sharpens steel. I don't have a problem with that. And but be very clear. I am a Democrat, but I'm not an uncritical one. I'm a grown person. I don't do plantations well. We ended that system. Where I am is letting people be free and letting people express themselves. And you know what? We might have a fight, Tio Hardiman, Daryl Jones, Attorney Mark Fancher, Attorney Robert Patillo. But guess what? We'll hug it out at the end. I'm from a large family. Nobody got everything that they wanted, but we got everything that we needed. My parents said, we don't love our children equally. We love you adequately. Different people need different things at different times. And I appreciate that. And that's where I am on this show. And the unvoiced need a platform more than ever before. So when I bump into people who say that they're disinclined to vote for the Democratic ticket, I want to know why. I don't shut them down and tell them that they're low information voters and things like that. No, that's not right. That's disrespectful. I want to know what you're thinking and I want to know what you're feeling. And I want you to know that you have safe harbor here. So whatever criticisms you have, give them to me. And I hope to stay here with you. But I'm going to keep on talking. I'm going to keep on speaking out. I'm going to keep on doing what I do because that is something that the overwhelming majority have asked me to do. So let's get to this. Let me start with you. Of course, we've got Attorney Daryl Jones, Chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Tio Hardiman. Oh, do we need violent interrupters more than ever? Absolutely, this brilliant organization based here in Chicago, but we need it all over the country. The real thing that we've got to deal with. From the National Conference of Black Lawyers, a brilliant civil libertarian and author, and opinion writer, Attorney Mark Fancher, and Attorney Robert Patillo. Let me begin with you. Before we get into what is going on with Vice President Harris, because as we record this show, we're waiting to find out who's going to be on the ticket. That's it. There's a whole lot we can just put out here today. But what about Cori Bush? We saw Jamal Bowman taken out. We've seen it was announced that there's $100 million put into this fund by APAC to take the Jamal Bowmans and the Cori Bushes out, but also Thomas Massey in Kentucky. It's just this is a real effort to remove these voices from elective office. What say you about Cori Bush, who's been able to and they chose a black man who made history himself. He was the first in his seat. He was running for the U.S. Senate, and he, of course, what he promised Cori that he would not run against him. Excuse me, Congresswoman Bush, and you all see this pop up behind me. He changed his mind so rapidly that when he held his press conference announcing that he was not going to that he was going to run against Cori Bush, they put tape over Senate, and you just saw Wesley Bell at the top. You can't make this stuff up, Robert Patillo.
Yeah, and I think many Americans are coming to this understanding of asking the hard questions. Sorry, and to your point that you were making about being free and independent voices, because we live in these media silos, we've now come to this place where people on the left and the right believe only their side of the aisle, and they become very recalcitrant to outside voices. It's almost a Platonic concept of the allegory of the cave, where somebody shows you the true reality. You beat that person to death because you don't want to hear the reality that's outside your frame of reference. What we're seeing now is this real question of Democrats have been running on this idea of defending democracy. But who is going to defend democracy from Democrats? That is a legitimate question that we have to ask now. After seeing what happened to President Biden being forced out of office by forces unknown that nobody has articulated to the American people exactly what happened yet.
Wait a minute, stop.
Pelosi,
Hold on,
Mhm.
because we still don't know anything.
Exactly. We don't know if it was a medical issue. We don't know if it's a competence issue. We know that he is well enough to continue being president for the next 6 months, apparently, but not well enough to run for reelection. His speech that he gave laid out nothing as to why he's not running. Nancy Pelosi did an interview last night where she denied that she was the person who forced him out. The Obamas have denied they're who forced him out. So I think the American people would very much like to know how democratic the Democratic Party is being. And similar to that, we saw what happened to Jamal Bowman out of New York for speaking out against AIPAC and the war in Gaza. And now we're seeing that any representative or any elected official who speaks out against the war in Gaza seems to be facing a primary challenge, which is very well financed. And remember, before President Biden stepped down, Netanyahu came to Washington, D.C. and released essentially a diss track against President Biden, saying that he wasn't delivering weapons shipments to him fast enough. And the American people have a right to know who is actually driving this ship. We have a right to know, do our voices and our votes actually matter? Or are they just like a suggestion box at the airport where, click this button to tell me how your service was, and we may or may not pay any attention to it. And when you're looking at what's going on with Cori Bush, who has bucked the system time and time again, not just on Israel, but when it came to the infrastructure bill. Thinking back to the infrastructure bill, that ended up being a failure that we talk about as being a success. You have the infrastructure bill, which was tied to the House Human Infrastructure Bill, going back to 2021. The entire package was $3.5 trillion, down from the $6 trillion that Bernie Sanders initially introduced in the Senate. They tied those two bills together, and House progressives held strong, saying they will not vote for the physical infrastructure bill, the $1.7 trillion, without a human infrastructure bill to deal with many of the societal issues that we have until both were tied together. Nancy Pelosi did an end run around, found 13 House Republicans to support the physical infrastructure bill, and passed it behind the backs of House Democrats and progressives. That is something that Cori Bush stood up to the party on. When you're looking at the debt ceiling issue, many progressives were holding up the debt ceiling vote because they were more so dedicated to their principles and their constituencies than they were to the party bosses. That made them persona non grata when it came to the Democratic Party. And we're seeing nationwide that the moneyed special interests are able to take out candidates who are truly voices for the people. This is why conservatives talk so much about the concept of the uniparty, because at the end of the day, so many things cross party lines when it comes to the operation of the government in favor of the oligarchical class. And Cori Bush has come back from, at one point, what was a 20-point deficit in her race to now be neck and neck with the AIPAC finance candidate. But going into this final kick, the question has to be, will she have the firepower to match dollar for dollar on air? And somebody who just ran for office earlier this year, there is no longer this idea that I'm just going to pass the hat at the church and get nickels and dimes from people and be able to run a race. You have to put in mailers. You need street teams. You need radio advertisements. You need everything involved in a modern campaign. And when you have one side of the aisle that can dip into a fund that potentially has $100 million in it and may indeed be infinite, we have to rally around and support candidates who are truly willing to be independent maverick voices and fight back against the system as it exists, or we will continue getting the exact same policies where Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio outperforms every single index known to humankind, and we're supposed to pretend we don't notice.
Well, Attorney Robert Patillo, you can hear him on WAOK every Sunday between 1 and 4 Eastern Standard Time. Of course, he's from the Rainbow Push Coalition. Attorney Darrell Jones, he and Barbara Arnwine have their show on WOL, both of them iconic stations, at 12 noon every Tuesday. And of course, our sister beloved, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, is at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays on WAOK as well. So, got a lot of people who are able to speak a lot of truth to power. But begging your permission, everybody, let's get to what we gathered here today to talk about. And it was inspired in part by you, T.O. Hardeman, when you were talking about Hmm. The I mean, there is pushback, and it's not just from black men about uh, Vice President Harris and her candidacy. Some people don't quite feel comfortable with her. I don't know if it's her prosecutorial background. It could be something as as I guess as hard to grasp as feel. Is something that's just not working for some people. In spite of the polls, I'm talking about the soul poll. And so, Tio Hardiman, why don't you begin things for us?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's an honor to be back on your show again. First and foremost, I want to just say that when it comes down to pushback with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, whenever you you go against the grain to a degree, then they put you in a category, right? I ran for governor here in the state of Illinois in 2014, secured 30% of the state vote as a Democrat, and I still was never really brought into the fold, right? Then I
Mhm.
ran again. JB Pritzker spent $170 million. It was a little harder to run against JB because he had the big money bag. But the point I'm making, I was never invited in the inner circle because I was seen as an outsider, even though I was a Democrat, right? And so whenever you speak out against any other issues that you talking about the soul poll, I speak up for the soul poll type of people, right? The
Mhm.
people from the trenches, and people don't like it most of the time. But I was born to be an outspoken individual. That doesn't make me wrong in a lot of situations. So I just want to get that out there. So I understand the struggle you're dealing with, Santita, when it comes down to you being a voice for the voiceless people, right? I was taken off of WCPT radio. People don't know this because somebody wanted me. I'm not gonna mention names. They wanted me to mention a particular candidate's name, but they came to me with some petty money, and I turned it down. Okay, and then
Mhm.
next thing you know, I get kicked off the station. It makes no sense. It's okay though. I'm on WVON right now. We're doing the best we can do. But let me get right to the point here. You have
When are
about
you on, when are you on WVON?
every Sunday morning from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. I have a real big following there. I built to show up over the last 4 years, okay? Over the
Okay.
last 4 years. So when we talk about Kamala, want to get a name right, Harris, what's going on with her? A lot of men may not want to mention this because I put myself on the chopping block. I support her anyway, but a lot of men probably do not believe that a woman can lead the nation. You got men that might have that mindset. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean she cannot lead the nation. That's just some old school type of thoughts when it comes to male and female type of relationships. Men are supposed to be the leaders, so to speak. I'm just putting it out there. We're in the year 2024 now. But I will say this, when it comes down to her being a prosecutor there in California, you have about 11.7 million people in the United States now that have criminal backgrounds to a degree. It's about 80 million that have been involved in the criminal justice system also. And criminal people that are ex-felons represent about 5% of the voting, population, right? 5%. So if it's a real tight race, it could come down to who might be able to kind of like sway them votes over in their direction. Donald Trump being a felon right now, right? He hasn't even been sentenced yet. But the reality is that he's trying to make some inroads to that particular population. And based on Miss Harris's background as a prosecutor, it could kind of hurt her. But what she does have going in her favor, she has a lot of other types of people that are stepping up, to support her on every level possible right now. So it's going to be a tough race. But when you're talking about if sexism may play a lightweight role, you're talking about white men that probably would never even think about a woman leading the nation, right? You got, some African American people may feel the same way. But I believe that what it's going to come down to is that her running mate, whoever she selects as her running mate, is going to be the telltale story as far as a success or failure, Santita.
Oh, I mean, there's been progressives have pushed back against Shapiro.
Right.
He supports school vouchers. He said some things that really are not in step with the new thought in mainstream America about Palestine and Palestinians. He volunteered for the IDF, of course, when he was
Yeah,
in his 20s, and
sure.
said, that Palestinians were not capable of self governance, that they needed to be babysat by the Israeli citizens. That was, woo. And then, of course, he treated the student protesters almost as felons in Pennsylvania. So, and likened them to members of the KKK. So there's a lot, and yet he's still in the top two.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's what the reality is that that's where it's at in our country right now, and they're really thinking about Shapiro because a lot of people they like him, but sometimes people's past is they overlook some people's past, like Donald Trump. His past is being overlooked. I said it before on your show. He's the not so perfect candidate running for president of the United States. Now let's just go on the wild side for a minute. This may sound crazy. What if Kamala Harris was to pick Kwame Kilpatrick? I'm just putting that out there. I know it will never happen, but the point I'm trying to make, he's an ex-felon. He's an ex-felon. What if she was to select him to run as her running mate? And next thing you know, that would push her all the way up with the ex-felon population as well. In reality, it would. I'm just hypothetically putting it out there. It would never, ever happen, because a lot of Democrats, I have to say this because I support everybody in the universe, are trying to be so politically correct all the time. That's why you end up getting a Donald Trump. Because if you look at all the Democratic candidates, and from my perspective, a lot of them always try to just like walk the fine line all the time as if they've never done anything outside of the fine line, in other words. So we have to begin to think out of the box if we want to really, really win here with Kamala Harris.
Okay.
I look at it.
No, I mean, I'm hearing you because I just want to hear your thoughts. I mean, Attorney Daryl Jones, what are you thinking? What are you hearing?
Well, Santita, it's really interesting, and it's great hearing the perspective from T.O. Hardman. There's a lot that's there that to unfold what he's laid out. But when it comes to Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, and her prosecutorial background and how people are receiving it, and I think that that T.O. was directly on point. It depends on the community that you're listening to, that gives you the perspective. The African American community isn't monolithic, right? As we always know and say. So there are going to be different aspects of it that will give different viewpoints, and even within those that are court impacted or formally convicted of crimes, you're going to find differences even within that. Because when you start peeling that onion, going into the prosecutor's side of Vice President Harris, you also have to deal with the actions that she's taken as a prosecutor that were positive. That she did do diversionary programs where people that were young offenders, that she tried to get them into drug treatment, try to get mental health for them, try to get all these things in place. But I think that one of the pieces that's there that we do. As a society, black, white, or whatever race, is that oftentimes there can be a tendency to treat the female prosecutor different than the male prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And so, when we start doing that, we see the woman that's there, and we say, well, she's being overly harsh. Well, she's not necessarily being overly harsh. She may be being equally harsh as the male prosecutor, but because she's a woman and she's coming off as, what we call tough, right, that we then start seeing as being overly harsh. I think that with Vice President Harris, when you look at her complete body of work, from her being the local district attorney to the attorney general, all the way through, that there is a balance that's there. I think that she's appropriately tough where she needs to be tough, and that she's appropriately, I'm not going to say lenient, but certainly progressive on some of the issues dealing with being a prosecutor. When you're dealing with being a prosecutor, you're typically not talking about being progressive anyway. It's the world in which you're dealing. So, I think that when we start to unfold all of that, when I look at her, and again, much like T.O. Hardman, I come from a background where we're dealing with a lot of folks that are returning citizens and their right to vote. They've been impacted by the system, and they don't think they have the right to vote. So there's a lot of that that's there. But with Vice President Harris, from her background, what we know is that this is a person that takes all of that in consideration. She's favored what we call the Freedom to Vote Act, which is a federal piece of legislation that says that, look, we want to level the playing ground with regards to when returning citizens have their opportunity to their rights restored to be able to vote. She's in favor of that. She's one of the people that are pushing in that way. So I think that, with Vice President Harris, that, she's going to be viewed a little differently because she's a woman prosecutor. And so the standards are going to be a little changed from us. But I think that overall, she is a very balanced person. She has the history of being a balanced prosecutor. She's now in the heavy political side of it. I think she's balanced that extremely well. And with regard to the selection side, I don't see a better person than Senator Mark Kelly
Mhm.
that she could select for it for a number of reasons. And I'll just throw out one, and that's the whole guns and banning assault weapons, and the story that he tells, the wife that he shows, the care that he gave, being in the military, being a person that was involved in flying missions. I don't see a better person for her to select than that, and being so steady and a steady hand through it all. So I think that when you bring it all together, you have the former prosecutor, and I know many don't like to say the former prosecutor against the currently convicted felon, right, with Donald Trump, but you have the former prosecutor that will prosecute the case against all of the issues that former President Trump has presented and gone through, and you add to that putting in place the former military person that follows the orders and goes to the line and puts his life on the line for all the country has to stand for. I think that's an incredible ticket. I think having a former prosecutor in the presidency right now is the right person at the right time with the right issues, with the right temperament, Cynthia.
That having been said, let me just stay with you for a hot second before I go to you, Attorney Mark Fancher. That's not landing with a lot of Black folks. I mean that's it's just not. It's because people who are in the system feel that she's been cruel. People who are in the system feel that she's been tone deaf. People who are in the system, or who've been in the system, or who've been adjacent to it, who've had to visit loved ones in prison, and all of that, they feel that that's nice, but you're on that side of the discussion. When I've got to give them my ID so I can see my loved one and carry the quarters, I've done that myself. So they can use the vending machines and all of that. Um, my brother Yusuf had a very interesting experience when he was in law school at UVA. I remember he called me one day and he said, I had a very interesting experience in lecture today. I said, why? He said, do you know one of the cases in the canon for prosecutorial misconduct concerns our uncle? He said, I studied Uncle Noah's case today. T.O. Hardeman, you know Uncle Noah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, wow. He said, can you imagine? And life comes at you fast, and there it is. And I'm just saying, but I hear you, you're right, but that's like almost an establishment argument. When you're talking to people out in these streets, they're saying something else, Daryl. How do you make an argument to them? Because
Well,
there is a gap. There is a gap, and I think we have to be honest about it. That's why, when Tio brought this up yesterday, I said, let's revisit this. Because what I'm seeking to do, I think one of our listeners said, let's imagine hating on a Black prosecutor who's running for president, but be silent on a white criminal who's running for president. Nobody's doing that because so many of these presidents are criminals, honey. They kill people, and they shouldn't. So just stop. What we're trying to do is examine why people in the community are not supporting this candidacy and see how we can bridge the gap. Because Tracy, I've told you when I had access to the phone and we're about to do that again, call me. Because otherwise I'm thinking you're a troll. Because when I'm talking to real people, T.O. and Daryl and Attorney Mark Fancher and Attorney Robert Patillo, as you're listening to people call into your show, Robert,
Mhm.
we're hearing something else. And see, T.O.'s in Chicago, Robert's in Atlanta and Baltimore and Washington, but you're in the Washington area, so it's almost like you're in the Beltway. But when you step outside of it, not saying that you're out of touch because you're not, but when because you travel all over the country registering people to vote, trying to get our voting rights restored and all of that and protect them. I'm hearing something else. That's why we're bringing it up, Daryl, because it's like, and people get very passionate on all sides of this argument. So, how do you make this? How do you make this? How do you convince them that this is a good ticket for them? Because for some folks, they look at Trump and say he's a felon. Well, so am I, and so what? That's To. It's true.
Well, that's why I brought that up. That notion, and right now Trump is definitely appealing. But see, the thing is this: before Kamala Harris was selected to run for president, Trump was about 7% in the African American community follows polling. Then he shot up to 21%. But I would like to dismiss any notions because Trump is an ex-felon that black people should definitely just support him in big numbers, because the reality is that Trump would be a one-time type of person. No African American person, male or female, with the background Trump has in the criminal justice system would ever make it this far to run for president. So it's what you call, in my opinion, white privilege 2.0. Because you know, and I know, and everybody knows, this is kind of like crazy with Trump steady, still being in the race. I just want to put that out. That doesn't mean Kamala is the best next selection. Don't get me wrong, because I'm more neutral here. I'm kind of neutral talking about it. But that ex-offender population could, if it's courted the proper way, it could make or break this particular election. Seriously.
I'm saying she has a chance to reshape her narrative. I mean, Tracy, this is the last time I'm going to address you today because you do this all the time. It sounds like you're blaming her for being a prosecutor. No, I'm not. Not at all. No. First of all, when we're in trouble, we call the police. I'm not against the police. I'm just against corruption on the police force.
For sure.
Sean Grayson never should have been on the force. And if he'd not been on the force, chances are he would not have been able to kill Sonia Massey, because he sounds like he's got a lot of problems. He's not mentally ill. He's just a mean guy. But I am never, ever going to stop. You're not going to stop me from critiquing people and criticizing. I don't do blue no matter who. I don't believe in that. I think you got to ask questions. I don't do plantation politics well, everybody. How about that? I'm an adult. And yeah, I mean, if I can't ask you questions, my mom and daddy have been together 63 years. My mother said I would never marry someone I can't fight. And I'm not going to elect someone whom I cannot question, not in America. Are you serious? You say you want freedom and democracy and liberty and justice for all? That means I got to be able to question someone who I hire. And believe it or not, the president of the United States and the VP, they're just highly paid hires in public housing. Vice president lives in the Naval Observatory. The president lives in the White House. That's a lovely project, honey. That's what it is. Very quickly, Daryl Jones, make the case, prosecute the case, if you will. Ow! I mean, two folks who would be disinclined, who say, I'm not connecting with her, and I think that, what I have read, what I've experienced from her as a prosecutor, it's a non-starter for me.
Well, I think that part of it is, are we saying that this is specific to Kamala Harris, or is it general for prosecutors in general, right? Because if you're talking about prosecutors in general, that when a prosecutor comes from the prosecutor side, you automatically have something that's against the prosecutor. If your person has been impacted by the court system, you already have in your mindset, this is a prosecutor, they're not for me. And so if that's the mindset that you have coming in, then one of the things that I think has got to be done is you got to really look at the person's product of work, what they've done. They're in a position where they're not trying to necessarily set people free, because you have victims that are of these crimes as well. If assuming the person committed the crime of which they've been convicted, you have a victim that is also there. So that has to be balanced out. One of the things I think that we've got to do when we're looking at prosecutors is that we've got to ask the question: have they been fair in what they're doing? Did they do their job well? That is, I can tell you, I've been both a prosecutor and defense counsel. I've actually been all sides of that equation. And I can tell you that when I became a defense attorney, it was interesting because I had clients that I had prosecuted that came to me to say, I want you to defend me because I saw how you were as a prosecutor. I understood that you knew your job, you did your job, you put your stuff in place, and you were ready. Well, this is what Kamala Harris did, Vice President Harris did. She did her job the way that she was constitutionally mandated to do it. And to the degree that she could show leniency, to the degree that she could put in place programs to help people that were impacted by the decisions that they had made, and the system that had merited what should happen with them, I think that's the degree to which she put things in place, and that she did what was in her wheelhouse. Let's lift up as an example, I believe the name was Espinoza, Officer Espinoza in California, who was killed in California by I think it was a gang person. I'm not really certain, but at any rate, the law enforcement community, of which the prosecutor is a part of, was pushing on her to go for the death penalty for this young guy that killed the officer. She refused, based on the evidence, based on other pieces that were there, to do that. She would not buckle to the pressure of the law enforcement just because it was law enforcement.
And she
That's
took a
the
real
type
hit
of
for
person.
and she took a real hit for that.
She took a very big hit
Yeah.
for that. But that's the type of integrity that you want in place. You may not agree with every decision that she's making, but if you could understand that she's standing on principle, that she stand, and in that particular case, not only was it integrity and principle, she was laying out the law, what the law dictated
But
should be
Daryl,
done.
but see, excuse me, just because I know we're gonna be tight on time, but this is why I think she needs to get ahead of these things. You
No,
can't just lay in the cut on that. You can't. You got number one. You can't just talk to the Divine Nine. You need to go into the hood and talk to people, or go into folks' churches and have a town hall meeting,
right.
so you can get the tough questions and you get them out the way. Oh, you learn. I mean, and it might evolve her thinking. To me,
No,
I think that's important for her, because by trying to figure out a way to deftly handle this, that is not going to work. Not in
yeah.
2024. I mean, it's not. It didn't work for her 4 years ago.
Mhm.
It will not work for her now. But stay right there, Attorney Mark Fancher. You've heard a lot of people say a lot of things.
And a lot of analytical, informed, insightful things, because I do think that this is an issue that's very complex. On the one hand, if you do have someone who has been chewed up by the criminal
God
system,
bless you.
and they just come in with an immediate opposition to her just by virtue of the job that she has, that's one thing. But there are people who do look specifically at what she did as a prosecutor, and they conclude, well, she did this that resulted in the incarceration of X number of Black defendants. She did this, she did that. And for those people, I think that they need to step back and remember that that's what prosecutors do. For me, it's just like saying, well, can you believe this? There was this brother who was a police officer, and he actually arrested Black people. Well, of course. I mean, that's part of the job description, and I think that individuals have to make a decision as to whether, for them, they believe merely entering into the system is offensive enough that they don't want to support that person. And if that's where they are, I get it, because on some level, that's where I am. But I also understand that there are people who go into the system with the mindset that the only way that I can change the system is by getting into it, by taking this kind of job and then changing it from the inside. Now, if that's the mindset that they have and they're honest about it, I don't agree with that, because I believe that these institutions cannot be changed. But if they're honest, if they're sincere about it, then I have to look at something else when I evaluate them in terms of their character, what I believe would qualify them to be somebody that I would support. And that is when they're confronted with issues and situations which are fundamentally offensive, which go against the interest of humanity, whether they're ready and prepared to sacrifice themselves in the interest of the broader community, in the interest of humanity. So I represent a Black police officer, a veteran officer, who on one occasion, while he was off duty in plain clothes, was approached by white members of his department and given the traditional Black man treatment. He was abused and harassed and put in cuffs and all of the things that generally happen. And that continued even after they discovered that he was, in fact, a police officer. When the supervising captain arrived on the scene and ordered him released from the cuffs, he pulled my client aside and told him, listen, what happened to you was messed up, but this goes nowhere from tonight. Nobody gets in trouble tonight. You will not report this. He said, yes, I will report this. He says, because if this can happen to me as a Black man who has a badge, can you imagine what would happen to Black men without badges when they confront these guys? He says, I'm going to report them and try and do something about it. The response was, if you do that, then you're going to face consequences for it. Now, my client, knowing that he was in for retaliation, went ahead and reported these guys anyway. He faced retaliation. Internal Affairs began an investigation of him. He was disciplined. He was harassed and continues to have difficulty on the job. Fortunately, a jury saw it his way, and we were able to prevail. It's on appeal now. But he was willing to make that sacrifice. That says a lot to me about him as an individual and the mindset of someone who I think has the types of traits or character that I would support if they wanted to do it. With respect to Kamala Harris, I have some questions. I can't evaluate what she did as a prosecutor because I really don't know that much about what she did as a prosecutor and whether she confronted those types of moral dilemmas, which would require her to take a chance to do a Marilyn Mosby, which is a prosecutor of the type that I'm talking about. But what we do know is that she was and is part of the Biden administration during the entire period when this administration has been engaged in an ongoing process of genocide, which has resulted in probably close to at least 250,000 deaths of primarily children. And when faced with that, we have not seen her do what I would hope that a person would do in that situation, which is to stand up, go privately and say, we got to stop this. And if told we're not going to stop this, then going publicly and say, I don't care. I'm going public and saying that we must stop this. And I'm not a part of it. I not only condemn what's going on in Gaza, but I condemn Zionism. I condemn the state of Israel. She did not do that. She did not resign her position. She did not go in and sacrifice herself in the way that I would expect. And for those who would say that's expecting too much, because if she leaves her position, then she loses the influence. She loses the platform. That's not the way these institutions work. I mean, it is not a matter of her staying there and in some way changing it. That is the only option that you have, because all of us have employers of one kind or another. And if you broke it down to the micro level, if you work for Walmart, and you find out that Walmart is engaged in an ongoing process of poisoning children, killing children, then you've got to make a decision. You know that you, as an individual employee of Walmart, are not going to be able to change it by staying within it. But you can make a personal moral decision to say, my employer it kills children, and I will not be a part of that. And no matter what they continue to do, I personally can't be a part of it, and I must leave. She never left. And that speaks volumes to me about who she is as a person and what she will do in the future.
Robert Patillo, haven't heard from you about this.
Well, I think that we're holding Kamala Harris to a standard that we're also not holding other people to. And to give kind of the counter side of the argument, we have to weigh what will happen if the other side happens to win. I think it's important to look at when we're talking about the things we want done as far as criminal justice reform, for example, and her being a prosecutor, what her plan is to restore the rights of individuals. She was one of the sponsors of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Bill when she was in the Senate. She has supported an executive order to address police brutality and mass incarceration. She has been part of an administration where Christian Clark and the Justice Department have gone after more cases of racial discrimination and racial violence than I think any administration in American history. And when you're looking at people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance on the other side of the aisle, the plans they have laid out in Project 2025, their conceptualization around Back to Blue, and their support from law enforcement organizations, I fully support us holding Vice President Harris accountable and putting our agenda before her and making sure that we are electing a candidate, a nominee that will be on board with any of those issues. However, we can't cut off our nose to spite our faces in situations like this. The danger from the other side is palpable. I have the Ku Klux Klan on my show about once a year, just to check in on them. I want to know what they're doing, what's going on. If I need to get the hell out of the country, they'll give me the heads up. I will let you guys know too. If they say be gone by Tuesday, I'm going to be gone by Tuesday. I'm going to take them at their word. But with that, they are, or at least they were about a month ago, giddy with excitement, with the idea of Donald Trump returning to office and returning this time completely unchained and unhinged. They've talked about that this time they understand they won't have the guardrails in place that there were last time. President Trump better knows the people to put in positions before he was very much trusting the bureaucratic system. And those people like Chief of Staff Kelly when he was there, Reince Priebus, other institutionalists were able to hold him back from some of the things that he wanted to do. This time we're going to be seeing the administration of Stephen Miller, Jason Miller, Steve Bannon, Roger Stone. Hardcore Ku Klux Klansmen are going to be in the United States executive branch. So, yes, we have to hold Kamala Harris accountable for everything that she does, but we have to understand that the other side of the aisle, they're ready to bring down hellfire on our communities, and this is not a point of hyperbole. This is an important point. Look at the people. Look at the people they're associating themselves with on the international stage. Donald Trump had dinner with Viktor Orban, the dictator of Hungary. He spoke glowingly of Giorgia Meloni, the fascist leader of Italy. He sees himself in line with people like Putin and President Xi and Kim Jong-un. They make it clear that this will be an administration about retribution. So yes, let's hold the Democrats accountable. Let's make sure they have the agenda that we believe in. But at the same time, let's not forget that the danger of Kamala Harris is far less than the danger of allowing Donald Trump a second term.
And you know,
I'm challenging.
And let me just say, just so that you know, that CNN is now reporting that she has picked Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate.
Oh.
And I will say this, Tracy, you said, Mark, are you demanding the same thing from Trump? Look, we have a binary choice here. Now, mind you, there are third-party options, and I would encourage you, if that is where your heart really is, I want you to do that. Because as an American, you have that right. And I will never, ever fight to take a right from you. When you take a right, you catch a whole lot of flack trying to get it back. It's hard to get a right back. Hard to get an amendment in place. But it's because the progressives pushed on Josh Shapiro that Tim Walz, a progressive, is her VP pick today.
Oh.
When you cannot stop demanding, you cannot stop pushing. And I'm going to push the person who I want. You're right. And do I have demands of Trump? Absolutely. But I'm going to have a demand of someone who I'm supporting. And you better have that too. Before you get who you want, you better get what you need, because that's politics, honey. This ain't no date, it's a destination. Don't fall in love, have them fall in line with you. You're hiring them. So don't you come to me with this. I grew up in Chicago. You had to vote straight ticket. You either voted with Richard J. Daley or you didn't have a job. This was a giant plantation for Black people. And we've been fighting it for 70, 80 years. Mayor Daley's been dead 50 years. That machine is still in place. It's the biggest, baddest political machine that the United States has ever known. So I was raised, and it's a machine that killed Fred Hampton. Killed him. They ran Dr. King out of town. My father was left here. Dr. King didn't bring him into town. He had a full scholarship to go to the University of Chicago. And we had to fight these people. We've had to fight. The easy girl loses in the courtship game. Don't you give it up unless you get something big in return. Yeah, I said it. And I'll add more to it before I take anything away. Don't release your leverage. That is why we have another kind of VP pick. Because they were going to put someone who said that Palestinians cannot govern themselves. Someone who wanted to criminalize, and who was criminalizing students who were expressing their points of view peacefully. He was on the fast track to be on that ticket, y'all. But because we pushed back and we said, if you want Michigan, you better not put him on there. If you want Pennsylvania, if you want the uncommitted, I want you to keep your enthusiasm. Now you got some people who might have not been voting in the fall who will be inclined to vote for her now. They say, I can negotiate with her. That's the name of the game, y'all. T.O., everybody, I've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm giving everybody a minute before we get out of here.
I'll make it
And don't
quick.
worry, Tio. You know you got a home here. You're gonna come back here.
Yeah, yeah.
Number one, when can we hear you on WVON?
Every Sunday morning from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. You can download the WBON app at iHeartRadio. You can log on to their Facebook page as well. And then I just want to say, I'll make it quick. There's a reason why I'm on the show with you, Santita. We think just alike. I just want you to know that. I heard everything you had to say. You came across real strong, and I'm grateful to be a voice for some of the voiceless people throughout the nation. And we'll just see what happens with presidential politics. What I would like to see come to an end, though, is all this going back and forth with the Democrats and Republicans, because it's like what's called political gang banging. Then you want the brothers on the streets to stop gang banging, either you on this side or that side. If you ever make a comment about against the other side, they will never forgive you for it. They will remember it forever. And we need to bring an end to all this. Like I said, this, I'm not on this and I'm not with that stuff. Let's just try to find a common ground and begin to really become productive and help make the United States more cohesive and more unity within the United States the way it should be. That's my only, those are my closing remarks, Santita.
Absolutely, Arlene, you're right. Criticism should be balanced, but you know what? We're not hearing any criticism. We have Kamala Harris who's still in a honeymoon, and that's not going to help her. If she's elected in a honeymoon, believe me, bubbles pop.
Oh, yeah.
And hot things cool off.
Yes, indeed.
Ask Joe Biden. He won with 80 million votes. He couldn't even get through his term. Don't play. This is a cold, cold game, and it's a real one too. Daryl Jones, 1 minute. Oh yeah, this is not for children. You better understand what you're looking at, because we don't even know what happened with Joe Biden. We ain't seen him.
Yeah.
And Santita, I want to add to all the listeners that right now, we're heading toward the fourth quarter in this election, and we're at a point right now that as of this recording, that the last time for elected officials, elected folks to be able to purge you from roles is now. This is it. So right now is the time for you to go to vote.org to check on your voting status. Because if they try to purge you from a role after today, that is illegal from the Help America Vote Act. All of that is in place. So you need to check on your voting status today, because you got to be in the game in order to be able to vote for whoever's in your best interest. And certainly go to vote.org, check your voting status, because that's extremely important. We encourage you to get involved in this process. We look forward to being there at the RPC convention, Santita, as well as at the DNC, and all the excitement that's going to be involved. But most importantly, folks, let me tell you, as T.O. Hardeman was saying, there are 18 million estimated impacted folks from the criminal justice system that have the right to vote and don't know they have the right to vote. Go find out your right to vote and be certain that you exercise that right, and don't let anyone take it away from you, Santita. Go to vote.org, learn your voting status, and check on your ability to be able to vote.
In fact, at our Rainbow Push Convention, the 15th through the 18th, we're going to have Greg Palast here. He's going to be showing his movie. I'm going to give you the date, Daryl, so that we can welcome him to Push once again. That's his home too. He and my father both went to the University of Chicago, not almost at the same time, but not too far apart. And he's going to be talking about all the schemes. And we need to go through those schemes, Daryl, because we're not paying attention. Voter suppression is still real, and it has been amped up. Mark Fancher, what say you in 1 minute?
Yeah, I just want to urge that we move away from being so focused on the politicians, the candidates, the system itself, and reacting to it because we're afraid. We're afraid of this person, afraid of that person.
Right.
People who have made real change historically, movements, individuals, leaders who've made real progress have been focused on principles. They've been focused on what God wants for humanity. Jesus was not connected to the empire. He rejected it out of hand and said, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to try and send my disciples to Rome to try and run for office in Rome or to influence policy or politics. We stand firm on God's principles and we will move on them. Dr. King stood firm on principles. He did not run for office. He knew what he wanted for people and he stood for it. And the system had to respond to him. And I think that if you look at any people who have really made progress, it's because they were focused on principles, not personalities. And we've become too tied up, too bound to trying to react to Trump, react to Biden, react to Harris, react to them based on fear and of what they might do. Let's get out of that. Let's look at what God wants for the world, focus on that, and the system will respond, just as Harris responded to the movement of people toward principle and justice in Gaza.
Robert Patillo, close us out.
I think what we saw with the selection of Walz is, as you said, a clear overture to the progressive wing of the party. I personally thought Mark Kelly would have been the best choice because he's an astronaut, military veteran, border state. But I think this is a clear sign that Kamala Harris is leaning into base politics, and this is going to be a not a crossover election as many elections are, where people are competing for the center. Is now a horse race where we're trying to see who can get their bases out, who can motivate the people that are supposed to be within their sphere of influence. I think we're going to see some very progressive politics coming out of the Democratic platform going forward, and something that will excite progressive voters, young voters, African-American voters. And this is a very good time for us to put our lot in there to make sure that we're part of that platform. We no longer, right now, the Democratic Party is depending on the black vote for more than they have perhaps since Obama in 2012. And I think this is where we have to put reparations on that platform. We need to have a real conversation about economic opportunities. When they talk to black voters, it's always criminal justice reform and voting rights. It's almost a defensive stature. It's time for us to make progress going forward and push the ball downhill.
Well, you know, it's important to make history, but more than that, you got to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The fact is, black families are on track to have negative wealth by 2085. And black wealth is on the decline right now. We're on a slippery pole. Whoever gets into office must speak to that. And the person I choose has to have a policy and plan for that. But I would say Trump has to have one too. Push. Right. Because whoever is president will be your president, whether you like them or not. That's how the game is played. Whites are Republican, Democrat, and they are third party. And fourth and fifth. Stop playing, everybody. A man named Robert Strauss was the chairman of the Democratic and Republican parties. Yeah, same person. Parties are for poor people, y'all. This is power. And you need to get your share. And again, the reason we have someone who we could kind of embrace now, we can work with, is because we pushed and we challenged. And we said, now hold on, you're going to lose me if you choose somebody else. And that's not a threat, it's a promise. Because trust me, that's how politicians work with you. That's the name of the game, everybody. Take the tears out your eyes and put the sweat on your brow. Let's get to work. I love you. I'm Santita Jackson. May God bless you.
Okay, see you. All right.
Thank you all so much for everything. Thank you. But I'm really